Hello everyone, RFG here with a review for RKGK, or Rakugaki for PC, a 3D platformer and action game developed and published by WabiSabi Games. If you're a fan of some classic Sega series, then you should be able to see the influences for RKGK pretty quickly. And even though those influences are easily noticeable, RKGK is still largely its own game. Before I get into that, I'll give you a brief rundown of the story. You play as Vala, teamed up with the mechanical companion Ayo and a few other members of her crew as they gradually join Vala throughout the game. Vala sets out to free the citizens of Cap City from the giant beacon and Mr. Buff's evil control and a robot army who uses screens of varying sizes to drain people's will. Throughout the game, you'll learn more about Vala's crew and herself, but it's all fairly lighthearted, with most of the story progressing after boss fights and chatting with crew members in your hideout. After the intro cutscene and dialogue panels, you'll be given a tutorial on what are usual platforming abilities. Jumping, basic attacks, dashing, etc. But also the not as common tagging graffiti on screens. Soon enough, you'll then be introduced to other abilities. Rail grinding, where you can jump, attack, and tag graffiti. A grapple, which is largely specific to certain enemies and crossing large gaps. A short hover that doubles as an attack, and an infinite surf ability that speeds up ground movement and becomes an attack in Defacer mode. Defacer mode is automatically activated after performing a number of feats, and a meter shown on the bottom right of the screen shows how far it's close to activating. Attacking enemies and objects, painting graffiti, grinding, etc. all can be used to gain meter for Defacer mode. As long as you're moving and performing feats, once Defacer mode is activated, it should stay active. Staying idle for too long, moving but not performing feats, and getting hit will cause it to deactivate. Early in the game, you probably won't need to rely on using VeloSurf to move around if you decide to explore. But it becomes more useful in later stages or if you're trying to beat some level challenges. A lot of the level challenges do end up being beating a level with a certain time limit, but many of them do require exploration. There are challenges for collecting coins or ghosts, each of which are used for purchasing cosmetic options for Vala and Ayo, graffiti paintings, and colors, of which there's quite a few depending on how far you are in the game. But painting a number of screens with graffiti is needed to unlock levels to progress. I spent a lot of the game trying to explore levels, so it was far above the necessary amount of painting needed to unlock the final levels. Exploring also provides you the benefit of learning more on the ins and outs of Vala's abilities. Surfing in Defacer mode should come naturally, but some of Vala's other traits or abilities might not be as obvious. Almost all of her air moveset gains vertical movement. Air attacking gains an instant amount of height. Hovering gradually gains height and then begins to descend quickly. Grappling off an enemy or object gives a quick launch. Another thing to note is that after you use the grapple ability, all of Vala's aerial moveset options get a reset. The same applies when leaving a rail grind. So that should be for some nice ways to beat time challenges, right? Well, only kind of. While the levels are pretty open, a lot of them still look like they're designed with a specific way of moving through them, and even though the cell shading, graffiti painting, and grinding will definitely remind you of the Jet Set series, but rail grinding borrows more from games in the Sonic series, and even limits options available for movement really to just forwards or backwards. Whereas in the Jet Set and Sonic games, you're able to jump off at any point, even if it's to your own demise. In RKGK, when you commit to a rail, you're fully committed to going in one direction. This wouldn't bother me as much if there weren't so many times that I've seen easily skippable sections of rail sequences that aren't possible here. Or if I didn't miss a graffiti tag moment that I had to go backwards through an entire rail sequence to get a painting, and then backtrack forwards to get through a level. This isn't a deal breaker or anything, since again, the levels still seem to be designed with a mostly linear progression, but I did think it was worth mentioning. I do also think that there's something off with the exploration aspect of RKGK. I've spent several minutes in many levels exploring as much as I could, but I could barely meet the requirements for many of the exploration-based goals. And when I just decided to pursue only what's in front of me, I was having a much more enjoyable experience. Boss battles presented a different kind of issue for me. I applaud WabiSabi Games' attempt to utilize how to use their in-game mechanics, but some of the early bosses often felt awkward and all bosses share mostly the same pattern. The boss attack sequence, the attack an enemy portion, paint graffiti on the boss, and transition section. After each transition, the bosses get into a more difficult phase. And though the early bosses felt awkward and took getting used to, later bosses just felt like they had annoyingly long final phases. Speaking of awkward, while the story moves along well enough and the animated manga-style cutscenes are well done, the dialogue panels used between characters often had weird pacing or just genuinely awkward moments. It's not always that way, and you can skip them even on a first-time viewing if that helps. The art style also helps. I don't think I've seen a game that used cel shading and had me react negatively to it. Even in early uses, it still looked good and in most cases still holds up today. The same goes for RKGK. Characters have an original look, and the graffiti art and effects look great. The environments are detailed, but I did sometimes find myself lost after a major camera transition, like after large graffiti paintings. I have mixed feelings about the music. While I didn't find many of the metal tracks all that memorable, the later stage music tracks felt more enjoyable to me. The sound effects were handled very well. While I enjoyed the game visually, sometimes things would get drowned out due to effects, but audio cues still kept me informed if I took damage or attacked a painting. RKGK lets you choose between two difficulties at any point in the game, with the only drawback being any progress you made in the stage would be reset if you change it. The difficulties stem down to more or less health, where you respawn after a stage fall, and how fast you gain defacer meter. Checkpoints themselves are usually placed reasonably far apart, but there are a few that may feel too far, and health refills are fairly abundant throughout a stage. But with the easier modern difficulty, I don't think most people should have too much trouble going through most of the game without some trial and error. And though the harder or retro mode itself doesn't make the enemies or environment operate any differently, the way respawning works after a stage fall might be frustrating. If you're into 3D platformers, RKGK does lay out a strong foundation. Its levels are made for both exploration and some solid platforming, and even if I think some design choices should have been handled differently, I can't say that would be a majority opinion. The game certainly has a lot of replay value, with various stage goals, collectibles, and unlockables. Be prepared though, as that may be quite the grind. And although most people should be able to handle the modern difficulty setting, there are parts that may be more annoying than rewarding. With that said, I'm interested in what WabiSabi Games has in store for the future. That's it for me. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks.